Okay. So if anybody has any questions, we're going to ask you to use the Q&A section of the webinar control panel, and Ann's going to be monitoring the questions, and I'll be happy to address those questions as we go through the presentation. But what we're going to talk about today is using processes to create competitive advantage, and I have to say this is probably my favorite subject of any work-related activity that we do here at Next Step, and we're going to jump right in. So the first thing that I want to make the point of, and is my goal for this presentation, is to change your mindset in how you look at your business and how you look at the processes within your business. Your processes are invisible. We can't see them, yet they are everywhere. Every action that takes part or takes place in your organization, every employee action is part of a process. And your business is built on processes, and those processes are composed of details. And as we all know, that famous axiom, the devil is in the details. It's always the details that get us hung up. If we're going to lose space in front of a customer or if something's going to fall through the cracks, it's always in the details. So from a competitive advantage point of view, if we can improve the details of what we do, we in turn improve the processes, which then in turn improves the business and the financial performance of the business as well. So we're going to look quickly here at, when I say a process, what I'm referring to. So in every action that takes place in your organization, there is some type of input, and then it's received by somebody, and that person's going to add their skills, knowledge, and information to that input that they received, and then they're going to pass it on with added value to the next person in the chain of events. That person in turn is going to receive that information, add their skills, knowledge, and information to that part of the process, pass it on. Again, it happens again until on the outside, at the end of the process, we've created customer value. That customer value doesn't have to be an outside customer. It could be an internal department as well. And if you look around your office, you will see this type of scenario, this type of thing happening over and over and over again. Everybody in your organization is doing this very process, this very thing inside your organization. So when things are happening correctly, they look something like this. You receive an input, the processes flow from one person to another, computer systems talk to each other, and nobody has to get involved, and on the outside, we have output that's been received. And so what we're going to talk about today is using processes to create competitive advantage, and we're going to talk about 3 different areas. We're going to talk about improving accuracy, efficiency, and adding secret sauce to our processes. I call this the ACE model, A-E-S-S, and I created the acronym, so I get to decide how it's pronounced, and I say it's pronounced ACE. So if you're thinking it's pronounced some other way, not so. It's ACE. And so the first thing we're going to look at is attention to detail. And when you think attention to detail, I want you first to think about, does your business ever let you down? Does it ever occur where you want your business to perform a certain way and it just doesn't hold up? Either a quote doesn't go out the door in the timely fashion, or a customer makes a request and they don't get the response they're looking for. Anytime your business lets you down, more often than not, it's because somewhere along the chain of events, the process itself has let you down. So we're going to look at some different reasons that processes let us down in our organization. 4 in particular. 1, the less frequently we do something, the more likely we are to make mistakes. And the analogy that we're going to look at here is assembling a bicycle. If we did it more often, we would get good at it. I think that's safe to say. If we assembled a bicycle every other day, we would get very good at assembling bicycles. But if we're only going to assemble a bicycle once every 3 years when our kids grow out of the bicycle they're currently in, it's a challenge every time we do them. So the less frequently we do a process, the more difficult it's going to be. In addition, the longer it takes to assemble a bicycle, sorry, we're having technical difficulties. The longer it takes to assemble a bicycle, the more mistakes we're going to make as well. So if we took breaks every 30 minutes and did just 30 minutes of the bicycle assembly every day and had to come back to it, pick it up and put it down over and over again over several days, and only did 30 minutes of work on that process, on that bicycle assembly every day, it would take us much longer, and we'd be more likely to make mistakes just from the sheer fact that we're constantly picking it up and putting it down. So the next thing we're going to look at is that the more people that are involved, the harder a process is going to be, the more mistakes we're going to make. So if we wanted to have a separate person or a different person do every step of the bicycle assembly, there was no continuity there. Each person was going to do their part. Again, we're going to increase the number of mistakes that we're going to make. And then lastly, the more steps that are involved, the more mistakes we're going to make. So if you take a bicycle assembly again, the more of the bicycle that comes pre-assembled that we don't have to actually do the work, the easier it is to assemble that bicycle. If we have to get down to the level of actually assembling the seat and putting the tubes on the tires and all those types of things, then the difficulty of that process and the time it takes to assemble it is going to be much greater. We're going to be more prone to making mistakes. So, in short, when we're looking at our processes, we're looking for about 4 things. We're looking for the number of people involved. We're looking for the number of steps involved. How many steps does it have? We're looking for processes that require more time to complete, and we're looking for processes that happen less frequently. Okay? And if we consider these axioms, we know it's a problem. These things exist in the American lexicon for a reason, that something fell through the cracks, the devil is in the details, we dropped the ball. If you search the internet for these keywords, you're going to see them appear in everything from business interviews to police investigations, where processes broke down and things did not happen according to the way people would have hoped. And a very good book in this regard is one that's called Broken Windows, Broken Business. And if you've never read this book or heard of this book, it's worth a quick read. It's not a very long book, but it's definitely worth looking at. And the theory behind it here is based on some work that was done by a researcher, and it's also the theory that Rudolph Giuliani used to reform New York City by removing the window washers from the street corners and loitering and those types of things, that if you don't fix the small things in your business, you send a signal that nobody's watching and nobody's looking and nobody cares. And then from that point forward, those things proliferate in the organization or in the business itself. So what this book is advocating, and I agree, is that you have to have a compulsion to see everything done the right way. As insignificant as a broken window might seem, it sends a signal to everybody who walks by that the owner of that establishment does not care so much about the business. Another book that I recommend reading, again, it's not a very long book, is the Checklist Manifesto. And Atul Gawande was a physician, and the book is mostly about the medical industry. And what he did is he went on a campaign to get doctors, especially in the ER and in the surgical room, to use checklists more often. And he got enormous pushback when he tried to do that. Doctors saying that they're too smart, they're too educated, they have too much experience. And yet the results speak for themselves. Every time the checklist was entered into those scenarios, the emergency room, the operating room, the number of complications, the number of fatalities dropped significantly and it's described more in that book. But no, the point is that nobody likes checklists, but they do improve outcomes almost always. So you have to pay attention to the smallest of details. And it doesn't matter whether or not you think your business is performing well. All that matters is what's in the eyes of the customer's opinions. And opinions can change on the smallest of matters. If you consider something as simple as a dirty bathroom in a restaurant, if you see a dirty bathroom in a restaurant, you automatically, every one of us do this, we make an assumption about the cleanliness of the kitchen as well. In addition, if there's a misspelling on somebody's resume, you make an assumption about that person who's applying for that job. If you call a business and the receptionist who answers the phone is rude, you make an assumption about that business as well. So opinions can change on the smallest of matters, and we have to be concerned with the minutest details in our organization. So next we're going to talk a little bit about efficiency. And the question here is, if the work is getting done, what could possibly be wrong in the organization? This is something that a lot of leaders have to struggle with, because a leader, for instance, could make a request for somebody to generate a report for them, and 3 days later the report ends up on their desk. But they are almost oblivious as to the amount of effort and work that it took behind the scenes to generate that report and get it onto their desk. It could have expended 60 hours worth of manpower and pull people away from other important projects. And a lot of things could have happened to create that report that ended up on their desk. So from their perspective, what could possibly be wrong? But behind the scenes, it's wreaking havoc on the organization. And what we do is we call this okay, if you guys can hear me speaking, would you use the chat window to respond and say that you can hear, if you can in fact hear us? We've had a couple people say they can't hear the presentation. Okay, I'm going to move on. We call this black box, the black box syndrome. And what that means is, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. If we're sending inputs into one side of this black box and we're getting the outputs on the other side that we are asking for, then what could possibly be wrong? And we're almost oblivious to what's taking place inside that box. And what happens sometimes is when we open up and we peer into that process and actually see what's taking place behind the scenes, we don't always look like what we find. And I love this quote by Mark Twain. It's that it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for certain that just isn't so, right? If we just know that our processes are all performing correctly, then we have no reason to investigate to see if they can be improved upon. But like we're saying here, is that if we open up that box and we actually peer inside as to what's taking place, we can find oftentimes we can find enormous inefficiency, opportunity for error, many things like that. Sorry guys, we're having some technical difficulties. I'm just going to check on something right here. Sorry guys, we got some people saying that they can't hear the presentation, so we're going to check it out real quick.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, web events made easy.
Hey, can you guys hear me now? Hey, can you guys hear me now?
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, guys. Evidently, some folks couldn't hear the presentation. I think we may have that fixed. If you couldn't hear the presentation, I apologize, and I appreciate you still being on the call. Hopefully we've got that fixed. If you still can't hear or something like that, then just use the chat window to chat and communicate with us. Ian's going to be monitoring that, and we'll get that issue resolved.
And everything has been recorded so far, so if you weren't able to hear it, we'll have it ready for playback.
Okay. So the point I was making here on this slide is that this quote by Mark Twain, that if it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for certain that just isn't so. And sometimes when we peer inside of our processes and actually take a look at what's taking place behind the scenes, we see that things aren't as perfect as we thought. There's opportunity for processes to break down. Things aren't happening quite as efficiently as we had hoped they would. And so one of the reasons that happens is it's the difference between a formal process and an informal process. And so a formal process typically takes place. It's something that we do every day. It's people's normal job duties, and it's repeatable. We do it over and over and over again. And it looks much more seamless when we do those types of things. When somebody says they'd like to buy something, that starts a chain of events within the organization, and everything happens fluidly. Information is passed from one person to another. They add value to that process. They pass it on, and everything moves according to plan. Computer systems talk to each other so that people don't have to get involved. There's no double keying of information, and everything flows correctly. And most of the time, these are the things that our organization does well. Because again, they're the things that we're doing every day, all day. An example of an informal process would be something like this. A customer comes to you and they say, hey, if I buy 4 times the amount, or if I buy in bulk, can I get a discount on that order? Well, there's nothing in your organization that says that you cannot provide a discount for a bulk order. But then again, it's not a documented process either, and there's no specific chain of events that has to occur to enable that volume discount to occur, or to determine how much volume discount you're going to provide. So a lot of times the way that a process like that looks in an organization is the person makes the request for a volume discount. It goes to the salesperson, goes to the person in the office and says, okay, we need this volume discount. He passes the information on to who he thinks it goes to, and that person says, hey, that's not part of my job, but I'll see what I can do. So he passes it on to the next person. Meanwhile, the accountant in the organization passes it on to the next person in his list. They both go to the guy in the inventory and checks for the inventory. The other guy passes the guy, and the guy going down here says, hey, that's not part of my job. He goes back to the department manager and says, hey, this is not part of my job. And he says, okay, well, I'll find out somebody else who can do it, and we pass it on. So she goes and delivers the information to that person. He gives it back and says, I'll do what I can do. She passes it along to her subordinate and says, okay, I need you to do this, and she passes it along to somebody else who she thinks should be involved, and there it because it's not part of that person's job duties. So that person forgets about it, sits on his desk. The salesperson eventually comes back and says, what's the status of that? She says, I don't know. I passed it on, and I haven't heard back. That person says, okay, well, I gave it to Kendrick, and Kendrick hasn't gotten back to me yet. Kendrick, what's the status? He gets the process moving. And again, eventually, the discount is delivered, and things happen happens at the end, maybe the way we wanted it to occur. But when we look at the process behind the scenes, obviously it's not fluid. It's very prone to error. If 2 or 3 customers made the exact same request, they may get 3 different discounts with 3 different types of processes taking place to deliver those discounts. So I love, again, this quote by Henry Ford here, don't find fault, find a remedy. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. You can't just tell your people to try harder. You have to actually give them the systems and the tools to be able to handle these types of things, the informal processes, the lengthy processes, the ones that involve a lot of people, those types of things. So what I mentioned at the beginning, that my goal in this presentation is to get you to change your mindset in the way that you look at the processes in your organization. And I want to ask you to adopt a process mindset where we are looking to ensure nothing gets missed in our organizations. So we're going to be looking for informal processes like we just talked about. We're going to be looking for lengthy processes that involve a lot of people and a lot of steps. And we're going to educate the people in our organization that everything they do is part of a process. It has an input and an output that they are responsible for, and we're looking for ways to ensure that those inputs and outputs happen the correct way every single time. So first, I want to recommend that you actually draw out the processes in your organization, especially the ones that happen informally. We usually don't start with the processes that take place every day, like taking a regular order from a customer. That's something that happens every day. The people that do the processes know them inside and out. That's not usually the place we would start with process improvement. We want to look for the ones that are very lengthy. Again, the informal processes are usually the best place to start. And when we draw out this process and we look for what we're going to look for are ways to eliminate requests for clarification and more information, because oftentimes that's where we see the indication that processes are breaking down. Somebody's asked to do something and they don't have the information they need to complete their job, so they're having to go search for and ask for additional information. So here's a few things to consider when you're looking for signs of trouble in the organization. You want to look for negative customer comments, obviously. Procedures that seem overly complicated. Most processes in organizations are not as complicated sometimes as we might think. It's the fact that we don't do them often enough, or that we don't have a good way of executing them, that make them seem complicated. In reality, most processes are not that complicated. Again, we're going to look for things that seem to take longer than we think they should. We're going to try to pay attention to processes that are not getting done right the first time. So when people participating in the process have to go back and redo things, rework. We're going to look for missed deadlines, and we're going to look for employees who are frustrated or confused about what they need to be doing next. Again, that indicates that the process is an informal process that people are not used to doing day in and day out. So one of the things I'm going to recommend that you do is you have your upstream workers interview your downstream workers. So what I mean by that is the people that are doing the work that's going to be passed on to the next person. We want that person doing the work to interview the person that the information is going to next and ask them 3 questions. What does the quality of the information I get, how does the quality of the information I give you affect your job? And that's going to uncover a lot of missed opportunities for process improvement, that one question alone. Next, how does accommodating last-minute requests affect your job? So in other words, if I hold things on my desk and I don't do them till the last minute and I hand it to you in the last minute, what does that do and how does that affect your efficiency and your job? And then lastly, we want to ask, if I did more, if I went the extra mile, if I exceeded your expectations, how would that help you do your job better? So we want our upstream workers to interview our downstream workers. And I'll mention as a side note here that oftentimes it's helpful to have a third party help with this process, because oftentimes what gets lost in the translation there, the workers that are actually doing the interviews don't always have the necessary skill sets to actually go back and change the process and make it better. They may understand what the problems are, but they don't know how to fix them. So a lot of times it's helpful to have a third party get involved in that interview process to make sure that the information that's uncovered can actually be used to resolve problems. Another thing is this old business axiom, again, that we've all heard before, that you cannot improve what you don't measure. We have to put systems and things in place that allow us to measure our processes and actually indicate or determine whether or not they need further work, or if we're improving or degrading on our processes. So this brief example here is an example of a process monitoring report that we can actually do here at Next Step, which in this example here we're showing customer resolution in terms of days. So a customer calls in with a complaint or has an issue. How long does it take for us to resolve that issue? And we can see that in June, it was taking us about 5 days to get that issue completely resolved and turned around. And then over time, the length of time that it takes to resolve that issue has expanded and taken longer and longer as time has gone on. That's very valuable information, and we probably would not see that trend if we weren't monitoring that process and see it visually like that. We would just assume everything was continuing on as planned. So we need to be able to put things in place that allow us to monitor our processes so we can spot these trends. In addition, these slides are going to be available to you, so you don't have to write this down. But this is an easy way and a very effective way of evaluating the processes in your organizations to prioritize what you're going to work on first. So in the first column here, we have the name of the process, and then we have whether or not fixing the process is going to provide some cost savings for the organization. And we're going to rate these things on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the greatest impact, 1 being the least. The third column there is it a source of customer complaints? Are we going to be resolving something that is customers are dissatisfied? We're going to actually be improving the customer experience by doing this. In that fourth column, we want to look for things that we can provide the most benefit for the least amount of investment. So we're going to make a rating there, 1 to 5 in that regard. And then the second to last column there is how easy is it to change? Is it a process that we can easily adapt and make changes to, or is it going to require a company meeting where we get everybody in the same room and everybody gets on the same page, and we have to make the whole change to the whole process at one time. We can't do it incrementally, those types of things. So we're going to rate ourselves the processes on those 4 items. We're going to simply total it up, and whichever one comes out with the highest total, those are the processes that we're going to work on first. Okay, so any questions that are building up here, we're going to answer a lot of them probably at the end of the presentation. But if you have questions, use the chat box in the GoToWebinar, and we'll be happy to answer the questions as well. So lastly, we're going to talk about here developing secret sauce, things that are going to generate or differentiate your organization and generate buzz in the community. And as a case study, an interesting read is the book Delivering Happiness by Tony Hesh, the CEO of Zappos. And if none of you have heard of Zappos, I'm sure your wives have. It's it's an online shoe company that has made its name in customer service. And in the book, their CEO, Tony, makes the point that everything that they're basically an online retailer like every other online retailer in the world. He feels that the one thing that they have that cannot be duplicated or copied is what they call their secret sauce, or what they refer to as delivering wow. So their whole business is based on secret sauce. It's the reason they've been successful, and it's the reason they dominate their marketplace in the online retail world right now. And what it boils down to is making thoughtfulness your mantra, putting yourself in the customer's shoes and doing things, little extra things in the customer's eyes that deliver thoughtfulness to that customer. So I'm going to encourage you to think a little bit differently here. This is something most business people, we want to be concerned with, EBITDA, bottom line results, costs, those types of things. We have to change our mindset just a little bit when it comes to secret sauce, because a lot of these things, some of them are going to cost a little bit of extra money. Not all of them require extra money, but some do. And we have to look at the long-term benefit of doing these types of things in the organization. So I'm going to encourage you to think a little bit differently. First, we need to see upset customers as our greatest source of innovation. When we see customers, when we hear customer complaints, we need to take those complaints seriously, as most of us do, but actually take that complaint and implement processes and things that will eliminate those complaints in the future. Actually take steps to make sure that those things don't happen again, and not just use hope as a strategy, as the old saying goes. In everything that we do, we need to ask, how can we do something that's never been done before? Okay? And we need to select one thing that will make us unique that nobody's doing right now and implement it right now. And it can be something, we're going to talk about a couple of them on the next slide here, but it can be something very, very small. It doesn't have to be something big, but it's something unique that nobody else in the organization is doing. And the reason for that is that's what makes it stand out in the customer's mind because they've never seen it before. So it can be something very small. It's just the sheer fact that nobody else is doing that makes it unique, that makes it a differentiator. Oops. The last one there. This is just a little tip, is to put people with different functional roles in the same room and have them collaborate. So an example of that might be your service people and your marketing people, or your sales people and your manufacturing people. Put them in the same room, throw a topic on the table that maybe a customer has complained about, and let them attack it from two different angles, and you'll be amazed by the type of innovation that comes from that when people look at things from completely different perspectives and they begin to talk amongst each other on how they can make those improvements. So the last thing here we're going to talk about in this section is the fact that we have to systematize our acts of appreciation and actually make them something in our organization that's going to happen fluidly every single time. So we need to ask, how can we show appreciation more often? And then we need to ask for some creative ways that we can show appreciation. And again, they do not have to be expensive. It's the fact that they're different that makes them stand out. We need to select things that are unique and systemize them so that they happen regularly. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that. And we need to leave nothing to chance, which is what systemizing your processes is all about. When we add some of these little things to our processes, to our organization, we need to make sure that they're going to happen that way every time, because it's the little things that matter, as we've talked about a little bit. Contrary to popular belief, quality is in the eye of the beholder. In almost every case, your manufacturing processes or your service delivery process could be absolutely perfect with no defects whatsoever, but if the customer doesn't see it that way, that's all that matters. So an example of that, and here's a couple. That first example there is a personal example from Next Step's point of view. Next Step could do everything right and by the book when it comes to delivering IT services. But if a customer server crashes, it's a piece of hardware, it has moving parts in it, things break, that's just a fact of life. When that server crashes, just by human nature, people are going to question the quality of the work that went into that. Even if you do everything absolutely perfectly with no defects whatsoever, there's going to be questions that are going to be raised. Another little thing that you can do is something as simple as send fresh flowers to people on their birthday or their anniversary. Again, not many people do that, so if you do that, you're going to stand out leaps and bounds. People are going to walk by that person's desk who received it and say, well, where did this come from? And they say, oh, they came from such and such company. Well, isn't that thoughtful? Other little things you can do is do something as simple as add a small bag of M&Ms to the envelope when you send an invoice to a customer. Just little things like that that add value to the customer and improve the interaction with the customer and build that goodwill when you're dealing with the customer. And when we talk about little things mattering, something an interesting thing that statistic that I came across, which I thought was really interesting, in organizations that have employees fill out online new employee questionnaires, when they ask them if they want to participate in the 401k plan, if they have the 401k checkbox defaulted to checked, then 86% of the people that sign up are new employees are going to sign up for that 401k plan because it's already checked. However, if the default option for the 401k plan is not checked, then only 45%, less than almost half of the people that new employees do not sign up for the 401k plan. So we're talking about something as monumental and as important as retirement and savings and 401k and those types of things, and it boils down to something as simple as whether or not a checkbox is defaulted to checked or not. So when we talk about little things mattering, it's not always just in the eyes of the customer, it's in every aspect of your organization as well, internally and externally. And here's the key point, and I think I've kind of made this point over the last several slides, but it's worth reiterating, is that you don't have to be diabolically clever when you're creating these secret sauce things. You just have to be consistent in the way you deliver them. Most secret sauce ideas that we come across, it's not that they're bad ideas, they die because of lack of follow-through more than anything else, because people don't know how to systematize them and make sure they're going to happen every single time. So in summary, 3 quick points just to kind of recap some of the things we've looked at, and then we're going to look at, we're going to dig a little bit more into actually how to solve some of these problems. The first one is, seek and ye shall find. If you look, no doubt about it, you will uncover opportunities to improve. And when you find those opportunities, you need to take the steps to improve them. Second, we need to look particularly at our informal processes and the lengthy processes that occur in our organization, because 9 times out of 10, that's where the breakdowns are going to occur. That's where we're going to be most inefficient. And remember that Mark Twain saying, it's what we think we know for certain that just ain't so is where the problems lie. So we don't want to assume that that just because that the right outputs are happening some of the time, that those processes are happening efficiently. That's just not the case. If we dig into those, guaranteed, especially on these informal and lengthy processes, we're going to find things that need to be improved, or where opportunity for error and for the ball to drop. Those opportunities are going to be there for us to fix those things. And again, little things make a very big difference. They don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be revolutionary or extremely clever. Just little things that you can do that nobody else is doing is where those secret sauce type things come in. And as we already know, these things are easier said than done, right? So now we're going to talk a little bit. Here's the soft sell that everybody knows is coming when you get on a webinar like this. We're going to talk real briefly here, just over the next 2 slides, of how to systematize, monitor, and control all these processes, the informal processes, the lengthy ones, the ones that involve a lot of people, a lot of steps. Control all these processes and monitor them for the effectiveness, all from one screen. And so the tool I'm going to talk to you about here in the next 3 minutes, it's a very short part of the presentation, is just the tool is named Process Plan. And basically what it does is it allows you to map out the steps of processes that exist in your organization. And it can be every process in your organization, from the informal processes, like somebody asking for a bulk discount, to the ones that are happening every day, to the ones that take 6 months to complete and involve 80 people. It doesn't matter. All we're going to do is list out the steps that need to occur, kind of like a checklist, and who's responsible for each one of those tasks. And we can specify who's responsible. Here on this sheet, we see that we've got Susan is going to send the offer letter. Kendrick is going to make sure the person does a drug test. This is just an example process, obviously. John's going to make sure the computers are ordered. We're just going to list these out in kind of a checklist format of all the things that we need to make sure it gets done. And what Process Plan is going to do is it's going to email the first person in that list, and it's going to say, okay, Susan, I need you to make sure that the offer letter goes out. And when Susan gets that email, she's going to complete that task. She's going to click a button in that email, because this entire system is email-based and it's web-based, so there's no software to install. There's nothing to learn. All your people have to do is be able to receive an email. So they're going to receive that email. It's going to mark the date and time that Susan completed that task. So we have some accountability there for what actually took place. And it gives us the metrics to be able to see how long it takes us to complete each one of these tasks. So we're able to measure these processes. We're able to make improvements because we're measuring and we have that information at our fingertips. When Susan's finished with her step, it's then going to email Kendrick and ask him to make sure that the drug test is completed. When the drug test is completed, we're going to move on to the next step. John's going to get an email, and the system's going to ensure that that task is completed as well. When the system sends one of these emails, it's actually going to monitor that task forever and ever and ever until the task is complete. And if somebody does not complete a task in an acceptable time frame, then it's going to automatically email that person's supervisor. It's going to get other people involved. It has some intelligence built into it, so that if a task lingers for too long, it starts getting other people involved to ensure that we get those tasks completed. So when that person's done, obviously it's going to email the next person in the list, and then Katie's going to get an email at last to make sure that the email account is set up. And as you can see here, once these processes are done, this process is going to happen correctly every single time, and we're going to have a log of who does what and when, and we're going to be able to measure these processes to ensure that everything happens the way it's supposed to happen every single time. Even the informal processes, like I said, the lengthy ones, we're just going to document the steps and process plans, basically going to take care of the rest. So another way to view process plans is that it's going to sit in the center of your organization, and it's going to orchestrate the steps and the tasks of every person in the organization. So you can think about it kind of like what this example is showing here. It's simply orchestrating the steps and ensuring that each person does their task when it's their turn, and nobody gets notified before it's their turn to complete their task. So that's process plan in a nutshell. There's all types of reporting. Some of the reporting that I mentioned before, where we can see how long processes are taking to get completed, who's doing what and when, where the bottlenecks exist. All that type of reporting is also in this tool, and we can get all types of interesting information that allow us to increase and improve the efficiency in our organization. As you can see on the top left-hand screen here as well, there's a free trial of this tool that you're more than welcome to give it a test drive free of charge. And again, since there's no software to install and it works entirely via email, that test drive can be set up in about 20 minutes. So it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to give the tool a test drive. So that's the end of the presentation. If you guys have any questions, feel free to use the question Q&A box in the webinar control panel. You see my contact information. You see my contact information on the screen here. If my email and Next Steps direct telephone number is at the bottom of the screen. I'm also providing a link here to my vCard. If you want to download my vCard or my contact information file, you can go to my blog at mryanwilliams.com/card, and you can actually download my vCard, which will load straight into Outlook or whatever email tool you use, and it'll load all my contact information up for you. You don't even have to retype anything. So that'll make that a little bit easier. All right, so we're going to look at the questions here and see if we have...
All right, I do see one question, Ryan. If somebody wants to get started with Process Plan, what do they need to do?
So you can go to the website processplan.com and actually sign up for a free trial there. However, what I encourage you to do is that if you're interested in a free trial to call Next Step directly, probably ask for me if I'm in the office. And that way I can kind of walk you through the first 10 minutes of the tool and just kind of get you oriented for the test drive and point out a few things to help you get off the ground seamlessly and achieve liftoff, as they say, to kind of help the tool get launched in your organization. If you're fresh to the tool and you've never seen it before, it's just a little bit harder to get oriented to it because it's not something that most people have seen before. It's a pretty unique tool. So I would encourage you to call the office, ask for me, and again, I'll just give you about 10 minutes orientation to the system, let you know what you're going to be looking at and how it works, and then from that point forward, you'd be able to test drive it, no problem, by yourself.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. I think that is all of the questions that we have for now, but if you do have any questions, you can email Ryan at his email address on the screen. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties that we had today, but we have recorded the entire presentation, and we will be sending that to you either today or tomorrow with full audio. And again, thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.